Testing. We are coming to you today from Lovettsville, Virginia, a small community in the United States of America. And seated here at the Mausoleum Renard are the family of Res Ulrich Renard and his brother, who is known in the trade as Uncle Ralph. Laying in a basket on a table adjacent to the long bench is one David Bruce Reynard. And one mother Reynard is hovering over him, preparing to shape him up for the long trip back to the Confederate States capital, Richmond, Virginia. And there goes John Bruce. Which one is that? That's John Christopher Balls Reynard, shipmate. He has a few words to say to his public. What would you say this morning, John?
I would sing a song.
All right, John's going to sing a song. John's singing a song.
I've been walking on the railroad all the livelong day. Don't you hear the whistle blowing all the livelong day? Choo-choo, won't you blow? Choo-choo, won't you blow? Choo-choo, won't you blow your horn, horn, horn? Choo-choo, won't you blow? Oh, choo-choo, won't you blow? Oh, choo-choo, won't you blow your horn?
Thank you, John. I'll tell you one thing. There's a young man that does not have microphone fright. Well, he approaches that microphone and he grabs it and he whips right in it. He knows it's going to talk back to me. Hey, John, get up there and eat your cereal. And one thing that they're having for breakfast this morning is cranberries, right from the bogs of New England. I've got another young lady to talk to you this morning. Her name is Mary Elizabeth Reynard. Mary Elizabeth, what do you have to say to all the people in the United States this morning?
Goodbye.
Remember, we're on a national television hookup. Now we continue with this program as we listen to the sound of Ricky Renard eating. Come on, Ricky. Give us the sound effect. Go ahead. Come on, we want to report this for posterity because there's nothing like it. The only thing that I can think of that would sound like Ricky is what we call the gumaki fish. And this gumaki fish kisses its mate, and it goes like this. Boom. Now go ahead, Ricky. Here's Ricky. Boy, it must be good. Sounds good. Thank you, Ricky Reynard. Now, here's John Christopher. He came up. He always likes to go about 8 rounds after breakfast, and his mother's putting his Christmas present, a pair of boxing gloves, on his fist. John, what do you have to say before you go into the center of the ring? Go ahead. You're recording, Johnny. Come on.
Goodbye.
Hey, why don't you say good evening, friends, or da-da-da, cha-cha-cha? Develop, do it.
Yeah, do it. That's what happens when you do that. Go on, do that.
All American. Can't. Which little train's that? Is anybody down there? Is Uncle Ralph down there? Well, little children, huh? All right, well, I'll go down then. He's on the limb that's breaking, and I'm supposed to go down and take a walk. All right, go ahead, Father, play. We interrupt this piano concerto to bring you the erstwhile R.B. Reynard Esquire and special envoy from the United States to Loudoun County and the town of Lovettsville, who was involved in top secret or spook work with the federal government in Washington. In fact, he's been spooking for years now, and as long sparking, he hasn't had enough time to do any. He's been so busy spooking, he hasn't had any time to do any sparking. Mr. Reynard, please, will you say something to the United States? This is coming to you live from Bowlington.
Hi, folks. Ain't it nice being down here on the farm? After spending week after week in a big city, among all those spooky people wearing their white shirts. I mean, their white sheets around all day long. Well, folks, been nice being here. I'll see you all later.
Just heard from the sage of Bowlington. He's in the middle of writing his third book. The last one was published and sold over 2.5 million copies over in under an assumed name over in Great Britain. Now it's been translated into about 4,000 languages, and he is living very comfortably out here on the royalties, which keep coming in every day. And where he used to take the covers off of cereal boxes and send them away with 25 cents, now every time he gets a letter coming in, it's got at least a quarter for him. Now we've got one dopey-looking character here who is just waking up. He's not saying anything, he just advised me. But he usually goes through a long process of unrolling every morning. He rolls out of bed slowly, and he rolls into the kitchen, and he does not, for the first hour of every day, have enough strength to raise a teaspoon to his lip to give him the strength to eat. And that's because he's growing so fast. Now we got another character over here. Reggie Renard. And Reg, I want you to know that we're on a nationwide hookup, but this is live TV. I mean, this is being taped. Don't play with my hat. It's the only one I have, you know. Now say a few words. Tell the people about how you can take the boy out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the boy, or tell them about the difference between a country feller and a city feller.
Well, the difference between a country fella, a country person, and a city person is that in the city, they're trying to swindle once and twice, and they're trying to swindle a great big thing, so they don't have to swindle anymore. And in the country, they don't want to swindle too much, they just want to swindle all the time.
That was very good, and I think that really describes some of the people that I knew very well during my years in the country. Has Isabel said anything now? We have Isabel. She is age 7.5, and she's going to talk to you. You should have done that a little bit louder now. Let me turn it up. You do it the same way you did it again. Go ahead. That was very good. That was Jimmy Durante Reynard speaking to you from Bowlington. Now we have another fellow over here who's eating oatmeal this morning, and he has a few words to say about the weather out here. He just wants to give you the weather report. Give the weather report, Bill. Go ahead. He's tense. No, well, he's been in the country too long now, and a microphone panicked him. Huh? But you didn't have anything to say this morning. Do we have a few? Here, we want to listen to the baby drinking milk. Now, quiet everybody.
What are you doing with that?
Mr. Renard is coming to you from the winter retreat on the last day of December 1962. And after tomorrow, it will be another year. But he, as you know, is the Uncle Raleigh of television and radio, and he's become known for his renditions of Aesop's fables. Uncle Riley.
This is the story of the fox and the grape. Very confidently he stretched to his full height and reached out for the grapes. But even the lowest bunch was well out of his reach. He tried jumping for them. He looked about him for something to stand on. He tried just about everything, but not one grape could he reach. He looked around slyly to make certain no one saw his disappointment, and, with a shrug, said to himself, "Oh, well, the grapes were probably sour anyhow."
Okay. Did you finish it? Uh-huh. Okay. Now Ricky Reynard is coming to you playing his guitar, and I think you'll all enjoy this tremendous rendition of whatever it is. Thank you, Ricky. Pretty hard thing to do. And we hardly had time in 1962 to accomplish all of the things that we set out to do. But now that we have so many things that we didn't do, that we plan to do, we know that 1963 will be a big year. Now, before we leave Bowlington for the Confederate capital of the United States, Richmond, Virginia, we will have a few words from Mrs. U.H. Reynard, Sr. Mrs. Reynard, Mother, will you please say something for posterity? Mrs. Reynard is taking the microphone.
What kind of pepper do you need?
Well, for porridge tomorrow won't be.
Yeah, I was wondering. Well, we'll start in here. Sitting beside me is Betty here with a baby, little white sweater and a little red toque. She's feeding him the bottle. Rick is standing over by the machine as the engineer. Mary is here. She's chewing her tongue. She has a new green coat on, green scarf on her head. Oh, and Isabel II, she's chewing her tongue also. Now she's grinning. Now she's got red gloves on, a brown coat, the fur collar. Let's see, Johnny's over there all ready to go. He's on the piano stool, turning around the circle. He's got a hooded outfit on with fur around the top. Let's see, Reggie's over there. He's examining a calendar, wondering when it's going to be next year, I guess. And he's getting overheated because he wants to get out. It's too warm in here for him. His father's got the car heating up out there waiting to take them all home. It must be about 10 degrees below zero, but I don't believe it is really. Ricky's sitting here at the table. He's got one finger twirling it round the middle of his porridge dish there. Well, when I told you he shoves the dish away, he's sitting there and he doesn't even seem to realize that he's supposed to be getting ready to go home. He's sitting there and no hat on, nothing. He's haw-hawing now. Well, that's the way it goes. And Mr. Freeman's sitting here on the couch taking it all in, saying nothing. Not a thing. All right, now I turn back here. The baby's gone to sleep. Betty's still feeding him the bottle. Let's see. Rick's standing over there with his overcoat on, pins and needles on one foot and then on the other. His hands in his pocket with a, what do you call this, a Yorkshire grin on his face? Well, I guess that's about all. They're getting ready to leave. It's a 5-hour drive down there, so it is a long ways. Well,
We made it 3, didn't we, bud?
well, you must have come fast, even though you got stuck
Oh,
out
we
front
had
in
a
the
good-
snow.
Yeah, well, we had a good road up until we got to Fredericksburg, and then the thing got very bad. Well, I'm not.
Oh, incidentally, they stayed overnight. They all slept very well. I didn't hear any complaints.
Had a good breakfast.
Had a good breakfast.
Ready to march, aren't we?
Yeah.
Everybody on your feet. On your feet.
Well, I hope you have a nice year.
On your feet.
I'm on the way down to the doctor's myself right now. Well, Ralph's all ready to go. He's just ready to take me. Well, I want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year for 1960. This is 1962, isn't it? It's the very last day. And hope you have a nice 1963. Well, I'm going to say goodbye.
Smart. Okay, I'm turning off the tape recorder now. We're leaving. It's been fun. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Everybody say Happy New Year all together. Happy New Year! Right, we couldn't be here to see the New Year's Inn as we had planned because this is a work day for the company and I have to close out some things that I won't be able to put off until after the first year. Goodbye. Goodbye, may the good Lord take a liking to you. Will you say that again for us, Bill, please? Come on, we got to put
Goodbye, may the good Lord take a liking to you.
Fine, thank you, Mr. Casper Freeman. Yes, indeed. Well, right away, I will. This is U.H. Renard, shipmate, coming to you from Richmond, Virginia, and I'm about to give the first in a series of bedtime stories for my daughters. Now, the one that they have asked me to read this evening is Peter Pan. We all remember Peter Pan from our childhood, and I know that Mary and Miffy will enjoy this reading this evening. Mary is sitting herself down here on my right, so that I'll be understandably, uncomfortably standing, and Mary Isabel is standing up on top of a wastepaper basket where she shouldn't be standing, and so she's going to get down, and she's going to pick up the little chair there, unfold it, and sit on it. See the chair, Isabel? Do you see the chair? Unfold it and sit down on it. And I see some kind of an alligator laying down there with a long tail. And Mary has just found another chair. Actually, it's a step stool that she's going to sit down. So she's going to get down off this big chair, and she's going to let me sit here. Now she's getting down. Hey, listen, don't bump this stand now. We're actually seated in the kitchen. You can hear the squeak of the chair, or rather her stool. Sit down, Mary. as she gets it. Isabel is now sitting down. Johnny, are you going to be with us to listen to the story of Peter Pan and Wendy tonight? No? All right. Let's just stop for a moment and see if we're now going to commence with the story of Peter Pan and Wendy. Mary and Isabel are both with me, and this is January 6th, 1963. And I can hear my dear Whiff saying, why don't we have our lunch now? Well, Bet, I am prepared. However, let us just read the first part of Peter Pan and Wendy, and by that time we'll be ready to go, right? Wendy and John and Michael, you can see them there in the window, can't you? And their mother, right? Well, Wendy, John, and Michael would never have left home if Nana had not been tied up outdoors for the evening. You can see Nana, the dog. Nana was the children's nurse. What? If Nana had not been tied up outdoors for the evening? What happened there? Even though she was a huge Newfoundland dog. She was a dog. The nurse was a dog, huh? I thought I knew this story. Usually she slept in a kennel in their room to see that they didn't get into any mischief during the night. But Mr. and Mrs. Darling, that was Wendy and John and Michael's mother and father, had never quite agreed on the advantages of having a dog for a nurse. Mrs. Darling pointed out how carefully Nana walked the children to school in the morning, carrying an umbrella in her mouth in case of rain. Only Nana could persuade the children to take their medicine at night. But Mr. Dowling scowled and said that Nana acted as though the children were her puppies. Nevertheless, up until now, Mr. Darling had never had an excuse for punishing the dog. It was an early evening, and Nana was in the bathroom getting the children ready for bed. Mrs. Darling sat by the fire in their darkened bedroom. She was waiting to tell them a bedtime story before she and Mr. Darling went to a party. Suddenly she heard a soft voice behind her. Suddenly she heard a soft noise behind her and turned. A strange boy she'd never seen before was dancing gaily around the room. He was dressed in green leaves and wore a green cap with a sweeping feather. He had not noticed Mrs. Darling in the dark. "Who are you?" she called gently, so as not to frighten him. Alarmed, he turned and saw her. Then he leapt for the window. "Nana!" Mrs. Darling called. Nana bounded into the room and raced to the window. The boy was too quick for the faithful dog. He stood on the window-sill a moment and then flew off into the night, but not before Nana had caught his shadow in her teeth. Aha! Nana wanted to toss the shadow away, but Mrs. Darling was afraid the boy would miss it, so she carefully folded it up and put it away in the bureau drawer. Perhaps he would come for it. She did hope he wouldn't, though. He looked nice, about Wendy's age, but somehow she was afraid when she thought of him. As she was shutting the drawer, Mr. Darling came in, all dressed for the party. Rushing to greet him, Nana jumped up and put her paws on his shoulders. "Down, Nana," he ordered. He brushed his coat sleeves rapidly. "Now see what that dog has done. It's gotten hair all over my new suit." He was so annoyed at Nana that he decided to chain her outdoors for the night. "Dogs don't belong in a house anyway," he said as he put her collar on her neck. "No, no, no," cried Wendy and John and Michael, who came in just as their father started to lead Nana away. "No, please," added Mrs. Darling, who was afraid the strange boy in green would return while Nana was not there to look after the children. She didn't want the dog outdoors. Nana wagged her tail as hard as she could, but Mr. Darling would not change his mind. "Out in the yard with you," he said briskly. "That's the place for dogs." Mrs. Darling tucked the children into bed and told them a story. Then she and Mr. Darling turned out the lights and left for their party. Wendy and John and Michael fell asleep at once, so they did not see the soft light that suddenly whirled into their room. It glowed on the mantel, flashed through the bureau, flew from chair to chair. When it was still, you could see it was a tiny, lovely fairy. A moment later, the boy in green glided through the open window. Silently, he flew over each bed to make sure the children were asleep. Then he called softly, "Tink! Tinker Bell!" Have you found out where they put my shadow? Tinker Bell answered Peter in fairy language, which sounded exactly like tinkling little golden bells. She said his shadow was on the bottom drawer of the bureau. Peter leapt to the bureau, and sure enough, there was his thin gray shadow neatly folded. He shut the drawer without noticing that Tinker Bell had disappeared, and began to fasten his shadow to his feet. But try as he would, he couldn't get it to stick. Neither soap, nor water, nor fairy dust would do. He sat down on the floor and began to cry. His sobs woke Wendy, and she sat up in bed to see who it was. "Hello, boy," she said politely. "Why are you crying?" Peter jumped to his feet, took off his cap, and bowed. "What's your name?" he asked. "Wendy Moira Angela Darling," she replied. "What is yours?" "I am Peter Pan," he said grandly. "Where do you come from?" "Neverland." "Goodness!" exclaimed Wendy. "Where's that?" "Second turning to the right," he answered, "and then straighten on until morning." "What a funny address. Is that where you get your letters?" "Don't get letters," he said scornfully. "Well, surely your mother does." "Don't have a mother," he said even more scornfully. "Oh, Peter, no wonder you were crying." "I wasn't crying about mothers," he protested. "I was crying because I can't get my shadow to stick on." "I'll sew it on for you," Wendy offered, jumping out of bed and getting a needle and thread. She knelt on the floor and quickly stitched the shadow to Peter's heels. The needle hurt a bit, but Peter did not cry out. And when the shadow was on, he forgot the pain. In his excitement, he danced and leapt and turned handsprings. He forgot that Wendy had sewed the shadow on. He thought he had done it himself. "How clever I am!" he crowed gleefully. "Cock-a-doodle-doo! Cock-a-doodle-doo!" Oh, the cleverness of me! Wendy was shocked. "You conceited boy!" she exclaimed. "I suppose I did nothing." "You did a little," said Peter carelessly. He danced and flew around the room some more. "A little," she replied. "Well, if that is how you feel, I shall go back to bed." And she hopped in and pulled the covers over her head. Peter quickly came down to the ground. He sat on the end of the bed, and he said, "Wendy, don't be angry. I can't help crowing when I'm pleased with myself." Still she would not look out, so Peter said, "Wendy, one girl is worth 20 boys." Wendy peeped out from under the blankets. "Do you really think so, Peter?" she asked, smiling. "Yes, I do," he answered. "How lovely of you," she said. "Let me give you a kiss for that." Peter did not know what she meant by a kiss, but he saw the pretty silver thimble on Wendy's finger and thought she must mean that. Bacon. So she didn't use the thimble. Then Peter said, "He should give you a kiss," and he left out he had brought all the way from Neverland. "Thank you, Peter," said Wendy, smiling. She put it carefully in the pocket of her nightgown. "Now tell me all about Neverland." Peter sat cross-legged on the bed and told her about his life in Neverland with the lost boys. He was their captain, he said, and they all lived together in an underground home in the woods. They were friends with a nearby tribe of Indians, but they fought pirates who lived on a ship in the lagoon. "Haven't you ever had a mother?" asked Wendy pityingly. "Once I did," he answered, "when I was very little. I heard her talking to my father about what I would be when I grew up. But I didn't ever want to grow up," he exclaimed. "I wanted always to be a boy and have fun. So I ran away and lived with the fairies." "Oh, Peter, how exciting," said Wendy. "Tell me about the fairies." Suddenly he began to laugh. "Wendy," he whispered gleefully, "I do believe I shut her up in the drawer." He ran across the room, pulled open the bottom bureau drawer. Out flew poor Tinker Bell, and she was tinkling with fury. "You shouldn't say such things," said Peter. "I'm very sorry, but how could I know you were in the drawer?" The lovely golden fairy kept flitting around the room, tinkling in her anger at Wendy, whom she did not like. Peter turned his back on her and went back to answering Wendy's questions. "But why do you come here?" Wendy asked. "To hear the story your mother tells you," he answered. "Since none of us has any mother, we don't know any stories." "Oh, Wendy," he said suddenly, "why don't you come to Neverland to live with me and the Lost Boys and be our mother and tell us stories?" "Oh, what a wonderful idea! I'd love it. For that you may give me a kiss." At this Peter looked a little sad because he had no more acorns to give, so he started to give Wendy back her thimble. But she smiled and said, "What I meant to say was you may give me a thimble like this," and she leaned over and gently kissed his cheek. "How nice," said Peter. "May I give you one?" Just then Tinker Bell glowed close by, and Wendy cried out. "Ouch!" she said. "Someone pulled my hair." That was Tink. She says she will do that every time I thimble you. I think she is jealous. Won't she mind if I come with you to Neverland? "Oh, no," said Peter, who didn't really know for sure. "She'll get used to you." But Wendy frowned. "Peter, how can I go with you? I can't fly." "I'll teach you. We'll jump on the wind's back and away we'll go." "What about John and Michael?" she asked. "May they come too?" "Of course," said Peter. "They can be lost boys." Wendy ran to John and Michael and shook them. "Wake up," she cried. "Peter Pan has come to take us to Neverland. He is going to teach us to fly." Both boys were awake and out of bed in a twinkling. "Oh, boy," shouted John. "Can you really fly, Peter?" For an answer, Peter flew around the room, soaring up to the light, skimming over the beds, and crowing all the time. It looked so easy to Wendy and John and Michael that they tried jumping off the bed and flapping their arms, but all they did was skin their knees when they fell. Peter finally came down. He blew a puff of fairy dust on each of them. "Now," he said, "wriggle your shoulders like this, and let go." Michael, the youngest, was first. "I flew!" he screamed, while still in midair. A moment later, Wendy and John were flying round and around the room, too. Look at me, they shouted. Peter stood on the window-sill with Tinker Bell hovering at his shoulders. "Are you all ready to go?" he cried. "Yes," they shouted together, and out the window they flew, with Peter crowing triumphantly and Tinker Bell lighting the way ahead. They flew through the sleeping city and out over the ocean. They flew that night and all the next day. It seemed as though they were going to fly forever when Peter pointed and shouted, "There's Neverland, there!" And there it was, a round, tree-covered island with a stream running through it, and in a far lagoon a pirate ship was riding at anchor, and smoke from an Indian tepee drifted up through the trees. John asked who was the captain of the pirate ship. "Hook," answered Peter, and his face became very stern. "James Hook." "Aye, do you know of him?" "He was Blackbeard's boatswain," John whispered huskily. "The worst pirate of them all." "What is he like? Is he big?" "He is, but not so big as he was." "How do you mean?" "I cut off a bit of him." John's eyes opened wide. "You did? What bit?" "His right hand." "Then he can't fight now." "Oh, yes, he can. He has an iron hook instead of a right hand, and he claws with it." At this awful picture everyone shivered and moved closer together in the gloomy twilight air, for it had been getting steadily darker since they had sighted the island. Suddenly Tinker Bell flew to Peter and whispered in his ear. "Tink tells me," said Peter, "that the pirates spotted us before it got dark, and they are waiting for us with Long Tom, their big gun. I think we had better fly in separately. Tink, you lead Wendy," he commanded, "and I will take Michael and John." And so they parted in the darkness. Tinker Bell flew ahead of Wendy, muttering angrily. But to Wendy the tinkle of her voice sounded lovely. She didn't realize that the fairy would like to lead her to her doom. You know what doom is? So now we'll stop right here. They've arrived at Neverland, and after dinner we will conclude with a story about Captain Hook. You see here on page 30 what an ugly fellow he is, huh? He got a hook for a hand. See that hook he's got?
Yeah.
Then he's got a mate there that looks like he's got a wooden stump for a leg, huh? Boy, well, let's look just at a few of these. Here's a big crocodile.